Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones, and your name is?
I'm Ollie Powell. I'm from the UK. Kind of visiting the US for a few months, so just kind of checking it all out.
This is like especially different from most stuff that I normally record because it's like generally people from around here or people that I know kind of well, and so I especially appreciate this because I get to establish a relationship with someone that has an entirely different culture from me, and that's really interesting. So first of all, your trip.
Yeah.
Where have you gone, and why are you doing it?
Okay, well, I'll start with Dubai first. I kind of always wanted. I've never visited the States before. This is my first time. I've always had a few friends over here that I've kind of promised to visit over the years, and I had some money. I had about enough. I think I'm struggling at the moment, but I had about enough. So I kind of just kind of said YOLO. I'm about halfway through kind of the States. My trip through the States, I've been here about 6 weeks now. Almost 6 weeks to the day now.
Dang.
I started off in like Boston, and I've covered like a bunch of other cities like Toronto, so I could go do kind of Niagara Falls, DC, New York, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, and then Oklahoma. That's kind of where I've been so far.
What's next?
What's next? Denver's next.
Cool.
For a couple of days, and then I got some family in Utah I'm staying with for about 10 days. Just traveling. Traveling's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's really tiring. So that's kind of like those 10 days are going to be like my vacation.
Yeah.
From traveling. It's the most tiring, probably the scariest thing I've ever done, but also the most fulfilling so far. And then after Utah, I hit Las Vegas just so I can go see kind of the Grand Canyon and
That's awesome.
and the Strip. Yeah, and then I cover California before I fly out and do a month in Japan. So
Dang.
yeah, pretty crazy. It's gone so quickly though so far.
Yeah. How is your Japanese?
It's okay. I'm actually learning it at the moment. I've got an app that I use to like kind of learn kanji. I've been doing that for about 6 months now.
Yeah.
So I'd say my Japanese is enough to get by. Like I wouldn't be able to have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
But it's enough that I'd be able to at least communicate.
Ask for directions.
Yeah, ask for directions, order something.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, just like the basics.
Yeah. A month though?
Yeah. It's a packed month, to be honest. I'm not even covering like half of Japan.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to do. And I'm also doing a few, like it's not just cities I'm doing, it's I'm doing there's kind of like a ancient pilgrimage walk that's south of Kyoto through like the mountains I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's like a 3-day hike, and it's like staying in kind of traditional Japanese inns, and you know they've all got like their own hot springs, that kind of thing. And then I'm doing a night climb of Mount Fuji as well.
Wow.
Because I've heard I haven't actually looked at an image of it I heard that it's amazing at dawn, the view from the top, and that's all I've heard is like people describe it. So I was like, I want to see it for myself. I don't want to look at any pictures of it online. I'm just going to wait until I'm in Japan and experience it kind of firsthand for the first time when I'm there.
Yeah. That's awesome. What has been sort of like the biggest culture shock coming here?
Um, it's a good question. There isn't so much like huge things. It's more kind of just consistent, kind of smaller things.
Yeah.
So like for example, I kind of had to readjust what I consider safe
Hmm.
since I've been here because of like the difference in architecture. Like kind of it's difficult to explain. There's a lot more of kind of industrial kind of
Yeah.
shape buildings that in the UK, if you had like a cluster of them,
Hmm.
people would be like, that's a bit sketchy, I'm not going there.
Mm.
But here it's kind of normal.
Mm.
Plus there's like, there's different laws regarding different gun laws, different kind of like police are different,
Mm.
emergency services are different.
Yeah.
So that kind of all kind of factors in. The biggest difference I'd say is probably the people.
Mm.
The people are much more approachable here in general. Are much nicer. They're much kind of more forward. In the UK, it's people don't talk to strangers.
Yeah.
It's very people are focused on their own lives, and
Mm.
yeah, but it's very rare to have a conversation with a stranger in the UK, or
Yeah.
to like here. It's very normal to compliment a stranger and just share a few words and then go on your way. In the UK, people would think you're like a nut job if you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually very different and probably kind of the biggest
Mm.
thing.
How does one make friends?
With great difficulty. Mostly, mostly from a lot of my friends are left over from like school and university.
Mm.
It's kind of if you want to meet new people, you have to go to the right places. So you have to. You might make some new friends.
Yeah.
Through your work. You might. Other than that, other than maybe like kind of school, university work, you have to go to like specific places like a sports club
Ah, okay.
or
Yeah.
like like a D&D night or something along those lines. That's you have to go to very specific places
Yeah.
if you want to meet new people.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's very difficult.
Do you think like the internet has sort of made that a lot more accessible?
I would say in general, yeah, I have a lot of friends from the
Yeah.
internet. Megan isn't the first
Yeah.
that I visited. I got a few back in the UK that I see kind of regularly, or I used to. I haven't seen them for a while. And I've got other friends here that I've been visiting. But the UK does make it, well, sorry, the internet does make it much easier, especially for people in the UK to meet like-minded people.
Yeah.
It's much easier to find those kind of places. And people tend to be more approachable online as well. I don't know. I know whether they're more willing to have a conversation with somebody you don't know online
Yeah.
than in person. So that's definitely helped.
Yeah. Okay, so let's sort of like turn it into what it normally is, which is what do you do?
So before I came out here, I worked for an app developer. It was a pretty small company. It was pretty boring. We made apps for like kind of gas engineers and like electricians, so I can do all their forms online. It was just a job out of university. I studied computer game design. That's what I graduated in. But that's a very competitive field, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to get a job, especially in the UK at the moment. So that's why I've had to go into app development for the moment. But I only did that I only graduated 2 years ago,
Okay.
and I only did the app developer job for a year. So yeah, that kind of question of what do I do is it's always a bit of
Yeah.
a weird one because I'm in like I'm in a difficult place where I'm still trying to pursue the career
Sure.
I want.
Well, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, well, what I graduated in, I'd love to do kind of work for a major developer. I have discussed making maybe like just a small game with a couple of friends. I think that's the nice thing about kind of game development as a career is that it's not so there isn't no requirement to kind of work for like a big company. You can
Yeah.
do it in your own time and still be successful.
Yeah.
You can work from home and be successful with it, which is nice. But yeah, the dream would be to kind of, you know, work for like a AAA studio. That's
like, who's the pie in the sky? Like
the pie in the sky. Oh, at the moment, I'd love to work for Blizzard. That'd be up there. Before, maybe if you asked me like 3 or 4 years ago, it probably would have been like Bungie or like BioWare.
BioWare still.
BioWare still, kind of, I know, kind of less so, just because it's, because as my tastes have changed, like the kind of games I've wanted to make have differed. There's a few smaller companies that I'd kind of really love to work for, like Supergiant games would be really cool.
Yeah.
Kind of like those mid-sized companies like that are always really cool. And Rockstar as well, like who wouldn't want to work for Rockstar? And like that one's actually in the UK, that one's kind of more doable than a lot of others. But yeah, there's quite a few. There's definitely a few I'd want to avoid as well, but you know, it's just, I suppose it's just about, for me at the moment, it's just about breaking in to industry, and like it doesn't really matter where I work, even if it's at, you know, like King or something like that, you know, making wherever
more Candy Crush.
Yeah, more Candy Crush. So, but even that would be a start.
Yeah. Plus, they also make like boatloads of money. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of the games they make, but as jobs go in the games industry, it's pretty stable. It's most jobs in the games industry aren't very stable. You know, you've worked for a couple of years on a project, and then you probably have to move off, depending on like the requirements for the next project, or if the previous one was a failure. But as that kind of like King goes, that's a pretty stable one.
What's sort of the well, I guess what got you into doing computer game development? Is that
okay? So it was a pretty kind of snap decision. So basically, my kind of in the UK, getting into university, the requirements to get into university are decided by your last 2 years of school. And my last 2 years of school didn't go very well because I was pretty unmotivated, and the subjects we choose subjects in our last, when we're 16 and 17, and the subjects I had chosen I wasn't really enjoying. And I've kind of set myself up on a path to go into like engineering, kind of. So long story short, I didn't get the grades I needed, and in the summer before kind of that new university year starts, if you don't get your first few choices, I mean, university, you can go into something called clearing. So clearing's when universities go, we've got space on this course, so, you know, apply, and we'll chat to you and we see what we can do. So it was a pretty snap decision from there, where I was just like, do you know what, I don't want to carry on the path I've been going down for like the last 2 years. And I was like, I love games, I love being creative. I love kind of, you know, exploring new ideas and that kind of thing. And new paths. So I was like, I just threw everything in. I was just like, it's like, it was literally like a month before university starts. So I was like, I'm going to go, I was like, Mum, I'm going to go do this. I don't care like what you think. This is just the path I've chosen. Which for me, normally I'm pretty kind of like, I like to take my time to consider a decision, but so far I've not regretted that one.
That's awesome.
Not a bit,
What was kind of like surprising about getting into that?
I think the amount of thought that kind of goes into, so normally it's split into like kind of 3 sections. So your designers, your programmers, your artists. I'm very much a designer. And I knew it wouldn't be as easy as what a lot of people think it's probably is, but there's so much more thought that goes into the design aspect. And a lot of people online on the internet will go, "Oh, I could be a game designer because I've got all these good ideas."
Yeah.
And it's nothing like that. It's the most core aspect of it, I would say, is understanding the player and the psychology of that kind of goes into that. So the reasons why a player might do something, leading a player, kind of getting the player to do what you want them to do, rather than, you know, running off to the other side of the map and, I don't know, just using their gun like a paintbrush. There's a lot more thought that kind of goes into that than I think a lot of people realise, and it's much more difficult than most realise, and even myself realised before I met. So I'd say that was probably kind of the most surprising aspect.
What's a great example of like a really well designed game?
So one that I always like to bring up is the original Tomb Raider reboot. Because of its use of light to lead the player is very natural. A lot of people bring up Uncharted, but I think that one's a bit more noticeable in the way that kind of a lot of the platforming in there, they use very kind of strong colours like the red and stuff to signal where you can jump to this. You know, they use like contrast between kind of the path that you need to take and what you can grab and what you can't. And then slightly older games, kind of like the original Mario is always a source. For example, at the beginning, what they did was in the first two jumps, like the first jump, there's like no failure state. So there's like a floor, like if you drop down, you just jump back up and you try to make the gap again. And then the second one, there is no floor. If you fall, you die. So it's kind of like teaching the player kind of gradually the mechanics of the game. And then lastly, Limbo. The best games, kind of, they teach the mechanics without you noticing. And Limbo's really good at that. You know, some games, they give you like a pop-up. It's like 3 paragraphs of text as they explain the mechanic. Not, you know, like The Witcher 2, not naming names. But Limbo does it in a way...
There's no text.
There's no text. It's just discovery, kind of, but it's a very purposeful discovery that developers have, the designers have made. And, like, you know, you'll learn several mechanics in the first like half an hour of that game, and you won't even have realised it. Which is why I kind of always use that as like an inspiration. Do you like Inside or Limbo more? I adore Inside. Inside, I love both, but Inside is a better game. That from every aspect completely blew me away. Especially kind of technologically, like that ending, I still don't know how they animated that, for example. Like
no spoilers.
No spoilers.
Just because people have to play this game.
No spoilers. That's why I didn't want to mention anything, but I love it when you get a game and you can just sit there and you're just like, how did they do that? I love that feeling. I love that feeling. Even after knowing like plenty of secrets and knowing kind of, you know, I can work out kind of after like maybe a minute of just thought, I would know how to replicate something or try to replicate it. That last section of Limbo of Inside, sorry, I still have no idea.
And also just like, so I played it on my computer, and so like on the PC controls, you can basically only do it with one hand. And so I was like this, and like I just had like my mouth open while still playing. I was just like, what the fuck?
I feel like that's a pretty kind of common thing with Inside. It's a pretty common feeling, but that's just because it's just an amazing game, and probably one of my favourites of the last few years, 100%. It's if people ask me what games they should play, Inside is normally always within the first 5 I mentioned.
Yeah,
because it is that good.
What are some examples of bad design?
Oh God. So bad design. Assassin's Creed 3 is always a really bad one.
Yeah.
There's like a section where you're running through like a burning ship, and there is literally kind of
Nothing telling you where to go.
there is no communication about the path you need to take through that. Bad design is always much more obvious. Like if a game's well designed, you don't notice it because that means it's going smoothly, and that means that the player's kind of focusing and experiencing what they should be. Bad design nearly always ends up in kind of bad games. I mean, there's a few examples where bad design does exist in good games, but that tends to be kind of in multiplayer rather than kind of in balance. Actually, BioShock Infinite actually has. While I love that game, there is an example of poor game design in there due to the fact that the decision to include a shield. And because they had that rechargeable kind of health aspect with the shield, it meant that fights kind of, especially late on to the game, because the shield's upgradable, it means that the fights just kind of got too hectic and too big. So in the original Bioshocks, because there's always a chance that the player's on low health, it meant that fights could stay smaller and more contained because there's always a greater risk for the player. When you've got that rechargeable kind of health aspect, it means that the player can just hide and kind of wait for a little bit, and then they can re-enter combat. So when you've got something like that, which you can upgrade continuously, it means that to make fights kind of to get more tension, to create more tension in the fights, as the player gets better at the game, it means that they need to become just on a stupid scale, which is one of Bioshock's kind of core problems.
The thing about it is that like Infinite's story is what made it so beautiful and so amazing, and then by the end of the game with like the final thing
on the blimp,
it's just not a great way to end such an amazing story.
Exactly. What Bioshock Infinite does get incredibly right is not just its story. What I love about it most is its environmental storytelling, which environmental storytelling is like my favorite way of communicating narrative, just because it's the most natural. And it requires
Naughty Dog does.
Naughty Dog. Bioshock Infinite does it really well, and one of the originals was Half-Life 2. Like Half-Life 2's opening is an incredible piece of environmental storytelling, and if anybody wants to know more, just play the opening 10 minutes of that game and you'll know exactly what I mean. And then one last example of just the poorest design is actually Skyrim. Skyrim, when I was at university, my dissertation, my final year project was narrative design in open world games. And Skyrim was one of my big targets. So my biggest problem with Skyrim is the fact they're like, here's this open world where you can be anybody you want to be. But we've also got, so you can go anywhere you want to it, and you can travel to the other side of the map right at the beginning if you want. But we've also got this incredibly structured linear story, like main story in it that we want you to follow. And it's incredibly juxtaposed because, in the world you can go around and you can murder everyone you see within reason, everyone you see. But the main story is you saving the world from a dragon, and there's no change in that path. You can't suddenly go, but I want to support the dragons. You are the hero that saves the world. But then that's, it's called ludonarrative dissonance, in the fact that in the narrative you're this hero, but in the gameplay you could be, you know, this super villain that literally kills everyone on the map.
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest kind of problems with a lot of open world games at the moment.
Yeah.
And Skyrim is probably the main culprit.
Yeah. Let's see. So, what are some ways that you could improve like some of your favorite games that just like had like a design flaw?
So Skyrim would just benefit from like the removal of a central quest, like story quest like that, because it's got so many these great kind of side quests with these, you know, these really interesting short stories. I think it'd be really interesting to see an open world game that kind of just experiments, just having like a bunch of really short kind of stories. Or Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild actually does a really good job because it tells most of its story right at the beginning. Like you're coming into the story towards the end of it.
Yeah.
Everything else is like flashbacks. So any story that you experience between the beginning of the game and the end of the game is just kind of filling in some information.
Sure.
Which is a really smart way of doing it, because then it doesn't matter what direction, kind of what angle the player approaches the game, because it's still going to make sense.
Yeah.
Bioshock Infinite would just it would just be solved if it just played like the first two.
Yeah.
That would just be its biggest solution. A lot of times though, it's just small changes like that, and most of the time, you know, developers know when they've made a bad game. They know where it can be improved, but most of the time, it's time and money constraints that force them to go down these paths, or force kind of bad design. So you know, most problems actually can be solved pretty easily. It's just you know, they don't get the extra month that they needed to kind of maybe to solve that issue. Yeah.
What's something that's sort of the games industry is moving towards that either, or let's say, what's something that you're looking forward to that the games industry seems to be moving towards, and then what's something that you don't like that the game industry is moving towards?
Okay, so something I really like that seems to be kind of happening now is kind of AAA content that's coming in much smaller sizes.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're seeing kind of AAA level quality content, but it's being packaged in like $30 or $40 kind of segments. So Ninja Theory in the UK, you know, they've done like Devil May Cry and a few other kind of games like that. They're working on something at the moment called Hellblade, which is, they say it'll only be like a few hours long, and they're only going to sell it at maybe like half the price of like a normal AAA game, but they want it to be AAA level quality. So they're kind of aiming for smaller experiences that have a lot of quality for a lower price, and that's something I really love. Because I think it's going to bridge the gap between kind of small indie games and, you know, those big AAA blockbusters. And I feel like that's a gap that really needs to. We need something in that kind of like middle zone. Something I don't like at the moment is exclusive content for multi-platform games. That's something I absolutely despise. Main example, probably Destiny, getting like a unique strike for a year, and unique weapons. That really frustrates me, because I think it should be universal across all platforms. Like, it should be the same content on every platform that game's available for. And it really frustrates me when people are getting less for their money than somebody else on like another platform. That's so frustrating to me.
How do you feel about VR?
VR is really interesting tech, but it's going to need a couple of years before it reaches its, you know, its full potential. It's exactly like consoles when they originally started. You know, I don't feel like home kind of console gaming kind of really started to reach its potential until like the Super Nintendo. And I think that's going to be the same with VR. We're going to have to go for a couple of kind of renditions of the software, I guess,
Yeah.
before we're like, this is what it's really capable of.
Yeah.
But there are some great experiences available at the moment, like Superhot in VR is a ton of fun, and it's a fantastic experience. And we need kind of like, it needs more of that. VR needs more of those kind of unique experiences. But at the moment, there's a lot of problems to solve, which is holding it back.
Vomiting.
Kind of HUDs. HUDs are really difficult to do. How do you have like a cursor? How do you have like a crosshair in like a 3D environment?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. There's a lot of things like that that need to be solved before VR, I feel, is kind of fully reaching its potential.
That, and then like the cost of getting into it.
Exactly. Just like everything else, so all tech, like 4K TVs, much cheaper now than when they first came onto the market. The next kind of version of Oculus Rift or whatever, that will 100% launch at a cheaper price than the first did. But I just give me like Sword Art Online, like full VR dive. That's just what I want. That's like the dream for VR.
Well, yeah. But then there's also like this dystopian view of like everyone just like lying in bed with.
I don't care what's happening outside as long as I can play in the game.
Exactly. Which kind of did happen in the anime too. So, well, that's awesome. Sort of, I guess, bridging the gap really badly, because it's just impossible to segue into the next part of the podcast. What is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
So in the UK and in Europe in general, faith and kind of spirit plays a much smaller role in here. So here, kind of like, just from my experiences, faith plays a huge part in a lot of people's lives, and churches and kind of places of worship like mosques and etc. They tend to be kind of like community hubs.
Yeah.
That's not the case in the UK. So for me, I'm agnostic. Most of my friends are either agnostic or atheist. I'd say that's probably pretty common for most people my age across Europe. I mean, we do have large groups of religious people, but it tends to be, it plays a much smaller part in people's lives. So for me, like I said, I'm agnostic. I grew up with a Protestant upbringing. Like my church was Church of England, was Protestant. So that was, that played a part in my childhood. But at secondary schools, public secondary schools in the UK, you don't have faith involved. You have religious studies, but you don't have religious education. There's like there's like a difference there. So largely people are kind of led to kind of their own devices regarding religion. It plays a very small part in my life, but I'm open for that to change. I'm not like one of those people that begrudges people their own faith. If people are happy, I'm happy for them. But for me, it's just I can't prove and I cannot disprove. So that's kind of
and just to like to make it clear to you, like, I'm like full on atheist. Like, you don't have to worry about offending me.
That's fair. 'Cause I know, like, I've got friends over here who are kind of very Christian. They're liberal, but they're very Christian. They're very involved in their faith. I'd say it's quite common in the UK for people to maybe label themselves as Christian, but they're not involved in the faith. They won't go to church. They don't really pray, or they're not really involved in like Lent and kind of those aspects. But they would still, if you ask them, they would say they were Christian. That's kind of like where my mom sits, where my dad sits.
Yeah. Like culturally Christian.
Yeah, I'd say, but yeah, just in culture itself, like Christianity and both other religions, kind of in the UK as a whole, play a much smaller part than here.
Yeah. So like, how does that shape sort of how you view? I mean, there's like the broader range of problems that people acknowledge through different points of view, and so like, it's sort of weird to ask, basically because I don't want to make an assumption about like, oh, what's your opinion on like Brexit or whatever, but because not necessarily everyone has one. But do you have an opinion on Brexit?
Yes, a strong opinion. I'm very unhappy with it. It feels to me like, so the vote was almost 50-50. But what a lot of people don't know is that vote was very split between older and younger generations. So there's a huge kind of fracture in society back home between the kind of older generation who voted to leave and the younger generation who voted to stay. My big problem with it is that so far, you know, millennials in the UK have not had it easy. Like it's like we pay for tuition. My parents and grandparents didn't. It's impossible to get on kind of the housing market. It's difficult to get jobs, and it feels like it feels like to me that a lot of the positives that I was kind of looking forward to have been stripped away from me by kind of, you know, the baby boomers that had everything. You know, they had cheap housing, great paying jobs, they had social mobility, and like that's the possibility of getting any of those in the next 10 years has been stripped away from me. The fact that, you know, most likely because of just like the economical uncertainty, we'll probably go into another recession, which makes my next 10 to 15 years hell. And it's going to take 7 years to leave the EU anyway. So by then I'm going to be 31. So I know I hear it, and a lot of people were incredibly misinformed and were driven by fear and hate. We had people, there was about 2 or 3 weeks after the vote, there was an insane spike in hate crime. We had people shouting at immigrants. Any migrant, doesn't, if they're American or Canadian, or if they're from like the Philippines or the Middle East, we had people shouting at them to get out. They were going like, "We voted out. That means you have to get out." And the rest of us thinking, we're just like, "Are you that misinformed? That's not what the vote was about. That wasn't what the vote was about." So it's just it's something that always makes me a bit angry, but just gonna have to deal with it.
And so I guess like I'm trying to like squeeze that into like a spiritual context, 'cause it does feel like younger generations, regardless of where we're from, because a lot of the stuff that you're saying like has a perfect parallel here, in that a lot of younger generations are more open, more embracing of different cultures, of different ideas. And so to sort of have like, we're sort of trying to fight the people that have established those grounds. And so it seems as though like the younger generations are trying to be open and be embracing. How has your traveling experience sort of shaped how that idea
That's an interesting question. But has it shaped me personally?
Yeah.
I've always been very open. Like I want to. I very much like the idea of bringing people closer together. Like that's why I hated Brexit, because it was very driven by like we used to be okay on our own before the EU, like that nostalgia. We'll be okay now, and it's a very different world from like 40 years ago. What I would say is how it's affected me is I feel like I'm much more approachable now than like I mean I've only been traveling for 6 weeks, but
Sure.
I'm way more outgoing than I used to be. I'm way more confident talking to people that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm way more approachable to people that don't know me than I ever was back home.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, I mean, 'cause you have to be when you're traveling. I'm traveling alone, so I mean, I've got a few friends here and there, but for the most part, you know, I've had to meet people along the way, and I feel like that's probably one of the main reasons why I came traveling is to kind of, to force that change.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I had to do it if I wanted to be that person. To change. Otherwise, I'm a big believer of if you wait until you think you're ready, you're never going to get anything done. So, you can't just kind of sit around. You just gotta do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something that I've kind of continually kind of carried through my trip. Even when I've been nervous or scared, I've kind of just been like, I've got to do it.
Yeah.
And every single time I haven't regretted it. So that's definitely how it's affected me the most.
What are sort of some situations that you've been in that you've just had to make that leap?
Mainly when I've kind of had no idea where I am and I've just had to I've either had to work it out myself or talk to people. I had a really scary situation in Houston, but so I've been using Greyhound a lot to get around the country because it's cheap and I don't have a lot of money. So I came out of like the Greyhound station in Houston, and for people that haven't been in Houston, the downtown is pretty sketchy.
It's madness.
It's pretty sketchy, especially outside the Greyhound. Like they don't. Like I walked out, and there's literally a security guard there that's like, no loitering, like move along, either walk down to either end of the street. So I'd ordered an Uber. I walked down to the end of the street, and I'm waiting for there. This white truck comes on the corner and pulls up, and he's like, "Yo, you waiting for an Uber?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're not it. I'm waiting for a Prius, and you're in like this huge white like flatbed truck." And I'm like, "You're not who I'm waiting for." And he's like, "No, I can be your Uber. Just jump in." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna wait for my Uber." Luckily, he turned up like straight after that, and like I jumped in. But like that almost put me off kind of exploring Houston. And I was just like, man, I kind of just want to move on to the next place because that really that rocked me.
Yeah,
I was pretty scared. But I was just like, do you know what? I'm here. It was one experience in one place. I've just got to put it out of my mind. Like, it's happened, but that doesn't mean that's going to happen everywhere in Houston.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like pushed it aside and I carried on kind of checking out the city. But
did Houston end up being pretty all right after that?
Yeah, it was pretty all right. I mean, it's probably still my least favorite place I've been to, but it was better than I thought it would be.
Earlier in the car, we were sort of talking about how like people is what makes the trip and like the experience sort of better. What are some of the better like relationships that have been established, or some of the things that you've done with people that has sort of made this trip more special for you?
Okay, so just kind of a few of my favorite things was when I first got to Toronto. Like, so I've been using a mix of Airbnb and hostels for accommodation. My first week in Boston, I was kind of completely alone, so I was still pretty scared, and I was actually considering going back home because I was just like, I'm not enjoying this at the moment. But I went to Toronto, I stayed in a hostel, and like that first day I met like a bunch of like great people and went and it was just we went and checked out like the Victoria Day fireworks, and like it sounds so simple and basic, but it was such an amazing time just with like
Yeah.
some new people. When I was in New York, I was staying with I had a Japanese host as my for my Airbnb, and it was just I had a really great evening, like kind of teaching him English and him teaching me
Cool.
Japanese, like with this French girl as well that was staying there as well as me, and that was like those kind of unexpected kind of kind of bonding, I guess, with people. It's just that's always kind of that's
Yeah.
standing out for me. And then when I stayed with friends, so I stayed with a friend in Pennsylvania and had an amazing time for a few days, and staying in Oklahoma with Megan, I've had like just the best time like this
Yeah.
weekend. So like, you know, I've seen Niagara Falls and I've seen like the Empire State Building, I've seen Manhattan from Brooklyn, from Brooklyn. And they're all amazing experiences, but what I'm treasuring the most is kind of like when I've been with like new people and like all
Yeah.
with kind of friends I've known for a while. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely what I'm kind of treasuring the most.
Um, spirituality sort of has this like idea of like connectedness with everything around you. As soon as the swamp picture from Avatar comes up on the, that's funny. But that like being connected with the world and the people around it. What's sort of the most connected that you've been around?
I'd say either here, staying here, kind of like, because I mean, like before I came here, it's like I only knew Megan, so like I instantly like it was meeting her parents and like meeting you guys, like her friends, and like you've all been so welcoming and so nice, and like I've gotten on with all of you so quickly, and that's been really cool. And in New York as well, just because it was like just this the most kind of eclectic mix of people
Yeah.
that I didn't know, but I kind of got on with so well and so quickly. And yeah, it's just that's always felt kind of like that for me was kind of like what traveling was about. Was like kind of going to like this place and kind of people from all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like yeah, like I said, it's like staying there was like four other people as well as the host. So just meeting all these people from like all
Yeah.
these different places and like their unique personalities, like shaped by like their culture and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
like yeah, those two kind of situations are definitely like the most connected I felt when I've
Yeah.
been here.
That's amazing. I think okay, so as far as like the agnostic point of view where you sort of don't claim to know, how do you feel that that affects how you approach the world?
I don't know. I don't know if it does, to be honest. Because it's not. It's just something that I kind of decided and pushed to the back of my mind. It's not something I give a great deal of thought about. I guess one way is that I don't prioritize kind of finding people of the same faith as me.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would count agnostic as a faith, just like atheism is kind of a faith.
Yeah.
The belief in nothing. And no, it just means that I don't consider kind of religion or spirituality, I guess, a factor in whether I like a person or not.
Yeah.
Unless they're kind of like really pushing their own kind of beliefs
Yeah.
onto me.
Sure.
As long as they're chill, I'm like, it doesn't affect me. I'm like, I don't know, like I don't really go into someone and like kind of ask like their beliefs.
Sure.
Like a lot of my friends I hadn't like that I knew out here, I had no idea. I had literally no idea about their faith until I kind of got out and you know we spent like hours and hours talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think it affects my view of the world too much. At least I don't think it does. At least not consciously.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
And then I think lastly, what advice do you have for people?
What advice would I have for people? Just if you want to do something, just do it. Don't think everything's scary. New things are always scary. And you know, I get anxiety a lot. And you gotta tell that part of your brain that's telling you this isn't a good idea, or I shouldn't do this, or I'm scared. You just gotta tell it to shut the fuck up. And you gotta push that to the back of your mind, and you just gotta go ahead and just do what it is you want to do. Because if you don't, you're gonna wait too long, and you're just gonna regret it. You're gonna regret not doing it 3 or 4 years ago when you first wanted to.
Yeah.
So just from my travels, that is the best advice I could give.
That's awesome. Ollie, thank you for doing this with me. I don't know how like present or public of a person you are, but where can we find you and your things?
So I'm on Twitter, majestic_Mav, MAV. It's probably like the best way to find me. Kind of post semi-regularly there. I post way more regularly there than I do anywhere else. So that's probably the best way to find me, if anybody's kind of interested in keeping track of what I'm up to.
Cool. Can we look forward to an amazing game coming from you, or
hopefully in the next 10 years? That would be nice, even if it's just as a QA technician or whatever, QA tester. But I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Do you have like an idea for like an amazing?
I have quite a few like ideas I'm really excited about, but I never like discussing them because it always takes away my motivation a little bit.
Sure.
Because it's like there's been occasions where I've explained kind of like a great idea I've had to a friend, and then I've kind of been less motivated to follow through on it. So now I keep it to myself until I feel like it's at a stage I've created it that I would be ready to show it to someone.
That's cool.
So that's kind of like my new philosophy for life.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Santiago Ramones. You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. I make this podcast. I should be releasing an EP soon. I guess I can say the name of it because this will be like a month from now anyways. So it'll be Songs with Words EP, and then probably a single coming from that as well, which you can find through my website, but it'll also just be a link to Bandcamp, where it is free to download, or you can pay whatever you want. If you want to pay me $1 for that music, that's perfectly fine. If you want to pay me $50, that is less fine, but go ahead and do it. But yeah, I look forward to that, and hopefully it will be out by the time that this hits the internet. I always end every podcast with my 3 things, which sort of shape my philosophy, which are Love Never Fails, It's Going to Be Okay. I might be wrong.